It's the Morning Star Drive 117.8. You soaring up with sky, now's the time, don't delay. I'm sitting in my ride and it's time to fly, so let's realign. Just listen and feel your mind.
Hey guys, how's it going? And welcome to the MSD on 117.8. It's Tuesday, December 17th, and we are ready to start this Tuesday together with the Lord. I hope my audio volume is okay. I did turn it up to the max, and it's kind of an interesting story with that too. Um, it's been a kind of a crazy week, but we're wrapping up finals here, and I hope everyone is doing well. We had like an outing with some of the law school students here yesterday. Like, there's a big Jewish population here, and so one of the Jewish students invited a lot of people over to his house, and he was making latkes for everyone. It's kind of like a potato pancake-ish kind of thing, and it was really good, and it was just nice to be able to spend time away from school. And you could tell everyone's mind is still on school, but like kind of in like a way of trying not to think about the finals that we just took and stuff. Yeah, but on my last final, I think it was like Thursday, I woke up in the morning for pre-dawn, and I was like walking into the bathroom, and there was water like all over my bathroom floor. And so this is kind of dumb of me, but the plumbing and the water pressure in my house is like really, really weak. Right. So if you have like two water sources on, right? Like if someone has like the bathroom sink running, then the kitchen sink won't really work, or the stream will be really weak. And if you have the pipes running to the toilet, like to fill up the toilet sink, then yeah, the sink or the shower will be really weak. So like when I have to like use one, especially like if I have to like wash the dishes or like take a shower or something like that, I have to turn off the water flow to the toilet, right? So that's something that I've been like working with like all year. And then on Wednesday, like a while ago, I installed a bidet on my toilet, right? And hopefully everyone knows what that is, right? But like, so I installed a bidet onto my toilet, and it like, because the water flow is generally really weak, it doesn't work very well. Like it like I figured this out like after installing it, at first being really disappointed because it just really wasn't working. But I have to completely restrict the water flow to the toilet and then turn it back on, and then the bidet will function that time. Yeah, so I think on Wednesday I may have turned it on and then like left it on, because the water flow never turned on, right? So I left it on the on position, it looks like. And so when I woke up, it had and so I didn't know that it would ever do this, but it started running at some point in the night. And it was just, I guess, getting water all over the bathroom. And I guess this apartment is quite kind of old as a building. And so the pipes that run, between the bathroom and kitchen, I guess they all started leaking. And so I woke up and the bathroom was entirely covered, and the entryway to the kitchen had flooding too. And I've heard from some folks that live in the same apartment complex that some of them have dealt with some flooding issues too. Yeah, so I think the pipes in this place are just quite old and need fixing. Yeah, but because of that, like I normally, like, my setup for recording is typically in my closet. And this is probably the worst part of the flooding. But it's typically in my closet. My closet's like directly in front of my restroom, and also maybe the pipes run along in that direction, because like when my bathroom is kind of like a hardwood laminate kind of thing, and so it wasn't that hard to clean up. But my closet also got completely soaked, and so there's been a fan running in there for like 2 days straight, and like trying to dry out things out. Like, they ripped up the carpet to like put in this, like, kind of this big commercial blower fan thing. It's like helped a lot, but like it's still quite wet, and I'm really hoping it doesn't like mold and stuff in there. And so that's typically where I would record because it's like the best place to have my mic set up and like it's not so echoey and stuff over there. And so I apologize if today's recording, the sound might be a little bit low on my end. I may have to try to figure something out in the meantime. And I'm really hoping that the flooding issue gets resolved, right? Because it's mostly dry, but like underneath and I think this may really vary depending on where you are, but underneath the carpet in my closet, there's like a thin layer of like this foam kind of material, and that material hasn't been drying easily. The top carpet layer has dried, but not the layer underneath. Um, yeah, and so that's been a little bit tricky. Yeah, but along with that, like, how has everyone been doing? Like as we wrap up this year and we're starting various different conditions, is there a part of your wrap up, like something that you are like kind of working towards and that you hope to finish by this year, right? Because I think as we get into this period, like there seems to be more and more things cropping up too. Like even for this recording, I'm recording this much earlier than I normally would because I think Pastor Sky needed this recording quite early, and so like even with that too, right? He's going places, and so he needs to get things done, and so there's a lot of things happening, and I think even for Rachel and for the second gen team here too, like we are planning for our retreat, right? And as the retreat gets closer and closer, there's like more and more that we have to do in terms of planning, right? So we're meeting more frequently, we're meeting longer, and we're trying to like iron out these details, and it's fascinating, right? Like we were talking about this, but I guess all of the female second gen department leaders are very like um administrative and organized. And I'm not gonna say that I'm not, but I think I wouldn't even want to claim that quality. Right? Like that's not something that I would ascribe, like and so we were joking because they took like this spiritual gifts personality test thing too. I don't know if Rachel's talked about it yet, but I guess one of our AP leaders posted about it, and so they took it and all of them got administration. And in a way, this can tie back to the conversation last week, right? About what kind of animals we are, what kind of personality traits that we have. Yeah, and like so, we do have to think about the gifts that the Holy Spirit has given us. And it was interesting. I was saying that on all the administrative questions on this kind of this personality test thing, I'm gonna put like the opposite of like being administrative because we need to balance this ship. Like, so like yeah, but it's really fascinating working together because I think different details come to mind for everyone. And so I'm like sitting there, I was like, wow, I don't think I would ever like think of this stuff. So it's been really, really, really fascinating. And I think like someone actually mentioned this in the law school yesterday too. Like for me, like I really notice people. And of course you can't notice everything about people, but like I definitely like kind of look at it at the the little nuances and differences with people. And I think that's been something a personality trait of mine. Like even when I was very young, um, but like even especially like as I've done more like going out into the world and like within Providence too, it really take a close look at people. And for me, I think it's a really important trait to have, because you can read a lot through people's like body language and through their face and through how they act. And of course, you may not be able to pick up everything like in the first instance that you meet someone, but I believe that it's an important skill too, because like we really have to see how each person can like fit together in a certain role and a position. And I realize that it's not really like as point blank and easy to like really figure out how to get people to work together. Because sometimes like, you know, um, like and I think this is something really important to keep in mind, right? Like sometimes like when you look at a situation, especially as an outside observer, you're like, wow, this situation could so easily be, remedied or fixed if, A does this and B does this, right? And it would really work out together. And these people have strengths that they can, rely on like for each other. And I still stand by that statement. I think it's definitely true. But at the same time, a lot of times there's like tricky things between those people's relationships, right? So like the people who should actually be working together, it's the hardest for them to get on the same page, right? And like that's, I think, just a part of life, right? But that's also like conflict in ignorance, and that's also the thing that causes the most disruptions in providence and for like brothers and sisters working together, right? I think really that's like something that even Jesus said, right? Like after loving God and loving the Trinity to the utmost, that is the next greatest commandment and the thing that we have to keep, right? And sometimes it is really challenging, right? And but I think it's especially seeing as how we're providence and we're this final 1,000-year history, like we have to do a better job with this than anyone to that preceded us. And not just that, but the future of providence for the next 1,000 year has to do a great job with this too. And so for me, this is one of those things that I feel like the thing that we had to learn from something that we have to perfect like within this generation so that we can pass it on to the future, right? Like when I think of like Deuteronomy 6 and like the various different things that they said to say to our children, to tell people that follows us, to the second and the third and the fourth generation, right? Even for us too, right? Like we probably will only live through the first like 100 years of this history, right? But within that time, there will be like, whether you're in your 20s right now or your 30s or your 40s, like even into our 60s, 70s, 80s, there will be new 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds, right? People who may go through the same things as us. And as people who are preceding them, we really have to impress it onto them in a way that they will understand, right? As it says in Deuteronomy, as Moses said, right? And as God said through Moses through that speech, right? To like make it so that like as you're walking you talk about this, as you are like sitting at the dinner table, right, with your children, talk about this, as you're like interacting with them, talk about this, right? And it's not just physical children but spiritual children too, right? When newcomers, right, impress it onto people in a way that they will understand, right? And I think this kind of leads us to the first major topic, and I'm kind of curious as to what you guys think, right? Like so I'm kind of ambivalent, right? Like in about this. Like I've been talking about this with the second generation team recently, and I think yesterday we kind of got to a good place. But I'm curious as to know, like, the various thoughts that you guys may be able to share, right? I was really grateful for the interaction last week about pre-dawn and about like your personality traits, like kind of understanding who you are. And this is also something that like having community engagement would be very impactful too. So similar to this grain of thought of or this train of thought of like making sure that the future generation knows, right, and understands clearly, right? Because we're the generation, and some of us like are in the tail end of this too, right? And we may not have been able to directly run with something into a sense, but the entire time that we've been in Providence so far, like we've been able to like see something and see what he's doing, like in at the time and place, right, that it's happening, right, in the year that's happening. And so like it's like what Moses was saying in Deuteronomy, that like you're the generation that got to escape slavery. Right? You're the generation that got to cross the desert of Zin, and you're the generation that knows what happened when we didn't follow God's commands, right? So these things a future generation will never be able to see, right? They will never be able to see the Red Sea, splitting. They will never be able to know what it was like to like run away from Pharaoh, to go through the judgments, to experience the Passover, these kind of things. So you have to make sure to impress it onto the next generation. And so we're the same way, right? Like honestly, like I think on Tuesdays you get this exposure from Rachel and from me about second generation. But I know like even before that, like a long time ago when we started doing 2G talks, right? Because there are typically second gen across a lot of different churches. And when you look at them, like I think I would say for a great chunk of people don't even know how to interact with them. Like they're like, what do I do? Like, what is this kid, right? Like what does this kid need? What do I need to do, right? And it's not that it's like a responsibility, but you just have no idea, right? Like what this person is about, like what this human being, right? What like God is doing in their life, right? Like and like they tag along to church, probably with their parents, unless they're like actively running already. And that part's really challenging too because I think that even for myself, like I only started really doing this like when I went to college, and the kind of the responsibilities and opportunities just really fell on me because the church is really small. So everyone was involved with all the missions and everything, right? There's just this a presumption of like, oh yeah, like we'll be just doing everything together. And that's great, right? But not everyone has that opportunity because as a second gen growing up, and this may be the same process for newcomers too, but in a lot of ways, newcomers may also have a manager who hopefully kind of like, you know, does this onboarding process, hopefully. And I know everyone's experience is vastly different on this too. But for second generation, you kind of go through this thing of like, as a kid, and something you talked about in the message recently too, like nothing, right? You may know like the various things at your church, but like in terms of like interacting with people, taking care of people, like and very realistic things in life and in how to make history, you're not really developed yet. And then you get to like a point, I would say, like probably even into late teens and early 20s, where you should definitely be doing things. And you may have had like small missions and stuff, but very defined parameters, very defined things. And I think that's critical, right? For young lives, for second gen and for newcomers and for new members. But not everyone gets that, right? And so like you kind of go through this gray area, right? It's kind of like the teenage area where you're kind of confused, you're not really sure like what you're supposed to be doing, like those kind of things. And you really don't know what you don't know. And so like a lot of people kind of miss that phase. And so like in part of this, right, like as we're planning all of our activities for the retreat, one of the sections that came to mind was like after like each like educational portion, we're going to be having like a variety of different workshops. And one of the kind of workshops or activities that we had planned is to have like a a Q&A session, like kind of like what Pastor Sky does on Thursday. The Q&A, you can call it like questions and reflection. And so we're kind of like grappling with this idea. And at first I was kind of adverse to the idea, because I like the idea, okay, but at law school so far we've had like these panelists like Q&A discussions like 5 6 times this semester, and I would say like the first time I was really interested, and by the fifth one I was like, man, I'm so done with these, right? Like these people, they're just kind of like spewing out hot air, and I know that in a Providence context and in the second generation context it'd be very different. But like the thing with these Q&A panels is oftentimes there's just people presenting their opinions. And that's not like the worst thing. And like I said, like maybe if it's just the first time, and if you've never experienced it before, it's important too. And the thing that came to mind as we were discussing, like I became more on board with it, right? As we were thinking about it. But the thing that came to mind was that oftentimes it's not just the response, right? I won't even say it's the answer, but it's not just the response that the person gives, but sometimes it's even just the question, right? And the conversation, right? Like it's not that they give you like what we call in the legal field, right? Like the hard rule is called black letter law, right? Because it's like written down into text, right? So it's not that someone gives you a black letter law that like must be followed, but through the conversation, through the story, through laying it out, you just kind of get a better scope of like the force. Like you just get a better understanding of what you're looking at. And so that's kind of my hope, right? Like we can't give the single answer that resolves these kids' problems, because like and this kind of ties into that conversation that came up in the message recently that I thought was really, really awesome, right? Where Sons of the Trinity were saying like in heaven, our heavenly language, when you express it, it's so clear that it just appears in the form of like an image. right? And that really makes sense like when you look at the like how that plays out even in the Bible, right? Like how God speaks, right? Like he really like makes it very clear, right? And like for us we use these natural languages, and so they have like various different like qualities to them, but it's not like so clear that you can just express it like you're thinking, right? And you can like express it and articulate it to someone like in the form of like images and shapes and like a moving video or something like that, right? So there's often miscommunication, often like limitations of our language, but it also leads to some beautiful things too, right? And so like for this, right, like we can't come up with that answer because people have to feel and experience it for themselves, right? Like even if you were to tell someone point blank what they should do in a particular situation, doesn't mean that they value it, right? And so this can even go like with the message, right? Like if we just listen to it, like as the message has been saying lately too, if you just listen to it and you don't take action on it, then like you won't gain, right? You won't feel it, like it won't be real. And that's something that that came up in quite a lot of different contexts, right? Like the message like over the last few weeks said, don't just pray, but take action, right? Because a lot of times, we may just be waiting around for something, right, instead of doing something. And so I'm kind of curious as to know, like, if you guys have like different ideas about how this Q&A might be structured, right? And like any ideas, right? So feel free to pitch, right? Because like through this conversation, I really hope that we can find like the best way to approach this Q&A, right? We can just do like the I guess the overall idea that we landed on after our last meeting is having like panelist speakers and then maybe like a moderator and asking very open questions, right? Like getting questions from the audience. And this is going to follow the lecture. And so I think there'll be some things priming the kids during the lecture too. And I think we have all sorts. So there might be people who are too shy to ask questions. And so hopefully then we can ask questions like anonymously too, right? Or have like questions that they ask well in advance and not just on the spot. But like that, yeah, like I'm sure that not everyone is shy, and maybe some people will ask questions. And hopefully, it'll be something that relates to each person. But the reason why I brought up the heavenly language thing and the image and stuff like that was because like this week too, for the scriptures for Sunday, it walks through a lot of the different biblical stories, right? With Joshua, like with the part behind I think there was like the Elijah story too, and also gosh, there was a lot. Yeah, Elijah and the Peter and the fish story, right? With the temple tax, right? So the all of the important introductory lessons. And like recently, right? Like as I was like reading my Bible again, I was reading through like I'm on the story of Jacob, right? And so I was like reading the part about like, him like making his way to his uncle's house and like, the stair like comes down from heaven, right? While he's sleeping at Bethel. And like like it as just like if you just think about that story, right, and you're not really thinking about it deeply, then you just read it as like like a narrative or like something that's not very like personal to you, not very like real and in your face to you. And like that doesn't really help us, right? If you just look at a story, if you just take it in as information, it really doesn't help us, right? And so we also know with like Israel, right, when he got his name changed, that he was wrestling with God, that he was trying to figure out this thing. And I would say that that is much more like attuned to our experience, right? Like a Q&A, someone telling you what the rule is, the black letter law, like someone telling you how it is, it doesn't really solve it for you, right? Because you have to like experience and gain that and gain that understanding through like taking action on it. And like of course there are some things that have a definite answer. But a definite answer doesn't necessarily mean that like it's a prescriptive thing that you tell someone to do. Like, oh, don't do this or do this, right? Like those things are things that like parents say to kids. But if we're like respecting people's intelligence, then you have to kind of give the reason why, or you have to let them know, like, hey, like, this is what, we've seen, and this is what honestly the rule is. But there's a reason for the rule, and you have to figure it out through your life. Like, you have to put it into practice. Otherwise, you will not gain. Otherwise, you will never know what, like, the Trinity is talking about. You won't know what something is talking about. You won't know the experiences and the various, like, different lessons that, Jesus went through. And even these biblical stories, right, with the temple tax, with the sunstop story, even with Elijah, like the things that he went through, like, they're not gonna feel like real to you, right? Like, Jesus talking about him like being the resurrection, like, what does that really mean to you? Like, if you're not living that life across your daily life. And yeah, and so these are the various different, like, things that come to mind. So, like, I'm like, I don't know. Sometimes I think I, like, overshoot, like, how things need to be. Maybe it only needs to be a simple Q&A, right, for these kids, right? Like, we don't have to go crazy about it. But at the same time, right, if we can aim a little bit higher in across all of our different things, we may end up being able to accomplish, great, like, things that we cannot conceive of. And so, like, that's something that I hope to do for everyone, and, like, for you guys too, right? Like, I think one of the biggest Q&As that we may experience, it, like, for all the listeners on MSC, is the one that Pastor Sky does on Thursdays. And, like, as a life of varying lengths of faith, is, like, so far in Providence, like, you may wish that, that you had a sort of Q&A, that you could just have a very open, like, conversation and dialogue, and hear from people, and maybe also share with people too, right? So, like, even if, like, this isn't just for the second gen retreat, if you yourself have something like that, right, that you feel like, oh, this might be useful, like, either in this second gen retreat, or just, like, in another setting, right, with different members, or even for myself, like, feel free to share it and let us know below. Yeah, it doesn't have to strictly be a Q&A, but, like, if you've had an idea about this before, feel free to let us know in the comments below. And so with that, we'll go into our first break for today. And then we will come back, and, I'll wrap things up for Bible today.
Romyeondong Temple was built here within the place set by the Trinity's will. In this temple we met the Lord and fulfilled the rapture of love. Here we face trials, raging like wind, but despite fears, blizzards and rain, palace of providence became my home. I cannot leave, Lord, I'll stay by your side. Romyeondong Temple was built here within the place set by the Trinity's will. In this temple we met the Lord and fulfilled the rapture of love. Here we face trials, raging like wind, but despite fears, blizzards and rain, palace of providence became my home. I cannot leave, Lord, I'll stay by your side. Here we face trials, raging like wind, but despite fears, blizzards and rain, palace of providence became my home. The place I love, I cannot leave, Lord, I'll stay by your side.
Awesome. And so, I hope you guys enjoyed that break. And so, kind of like along with this, I guess I like thought of an idea like while like putting in the song for the break. But I guess one of the things that I'm talking about with this kind of like learning is like a process, right? Like sometimes there are hard and fast rules, right? Like if you're like doing things like mathematics where there's one clear answer, like you need to know like one clear answer. But in terms of like learning how to like navigate and manage your life, those are things that you have to like not just learn the theory but learn it in application, right? And so like I guess like an idea, like one of the thoughts that came to mind was like last week when Pastor Sky was talking about like the direction with evangelism that came up about like making people into like members first, and then selectively teaching them the word for the 1,000 year history. But that was really fascinating. But the good thing about having that conversation is really that we're having it in conversation, right? Like we're kind of like putting a form to the idea, like, okay, like so how do we go about doing this, right? How do we like fulfill the thing this direction, right? Because I think for a lot of us, like when that direction came out, it makes a lot of sense. We're like, yeah, that sounds great, right? Because we know, right? We know that we have to thoroughly check and vet people. And we know, and I think we've kind of seen this too, right? And many of the people listening to this podcast may be people like this, right? Like, yeah, like sometimes maybe our lecturers and our managers did have to manage us and take care of us. And maybe they were like, I don't know, like crises in our faith or pivotal moments that we had to overcome. But a lot of the members who came, they came even while overcoming many great difficulties and struggles too. Like versus other people whose lives may have been a lot more smooth sailing, right? Like at the time that they were listening to the word, and yet they still might not have come, right? Like they might not have passed, or even after passing, right, they left like and went back to the world. Right. And so like one of the things that the message said is that, for the people who like will come, they will come regardless, right? Like even if we're not like, going so extreme in terms of managing them. And I think in a part that's like something that we hope for, right? With honestly with all of our lives, right? That like we will like bring the people who are ready, right? That's something that we talked about before. But making that world of providence, like because not everyone might become a counterpart of love, right? Like even though and Pastor Sky was kind of walking through this, and I think it's that process of talking it out, like putting a form to it, right? While we may not be able to dump the whole image, right, with the heavenly language, like we still can through our own natural language, right? So and we're like, yeah, like not everyone can realistically be a counterpart, right? Because that requires work, right? And that requires fixing our character and stuff like that. And people have vastly different interests in the world. And so if their heart and their life isn't into it, then they can't do it. But making people, generally speaking, into good people of like God's providence, of his love, of his history, that still needs to be done like across the world. And that is also part of our responsibility, right? It's kind of like it's a little bit different, but it's like what Jesus told even to the disciples who, try to prevent people who were casting out demons in Jesus's name, right? Like like we shouldn't stop that necessarily, right? If people are following Christ, even though they're not like not of us, not with us, like we're still making the world into a better place, like into a world that is like very, I would say, like habitable and like nurturing to God's history by like transforming and shaping the world into like the image of providence, right? An extension of Warmyongdong, an extension of what we're doing here. Right, and then of those the people there, right, like after we see, right, we can give the word to people, and the people that God has prepared, they will continue to learn, and of course we still have to manage and stuff too, but like there's like some people who I think we pull teeth, right, and drag tooth and nail to bring into this history. And honestly, they might not be ready in that moment. And even when they come, maybe they don't do well. But there's also people who overcame those great odds and then they, do really well too. So it really does vary, right? But it was that process of that conversation, right, that we had last week all together, right, by Pastor Sky bringing it up. Because sometimes, like, we'll have the question, we'll have the thought, we'll have the message, but we won't really do anything with it, right? And we won't even talk about it, right? And so like having that process of conversation is really important. And so like I was like thinking tying that into the Q&A discussion from earlier, about like the various different forms that it could take. And I'm also considering like what else we could do, right? Like like in this kind of process, right? Because it's not just through a retreat, it's not just through a Q&A panel, it's not just through MSD either, but like helping members and helping each other like run in this history and figure things out and live according to the Trinity's example is like pretty much like everything that we're doing, right? Like when we listen to the word, when we have different events, when we have guest speakers and lectures and events together, those are all part of making this great Providence history, right? And making God's history here on earth like as this copy and as this perfect shadow of what's in heaven. And so with that, we'll kind of like wrap things up for today's segment. I think I did have one other thing, and so just sharing one final thing with you guys before handing it off to Rachel was, oh, and this is something I've been thinking about a lot for a long time too, right? So I'm kind of opening it up because we are like this extended network, right? And there might be direct listeners who are interested, or you may know of people who are interested too. And so the thing that I've been thinking about for a while is like having writing based things, like kind of even similar to the MSD, right? Or to like Pastor Sky's Rebel podcast, but in the form of writing, like maybe like a newsletter or something that we can share with newcomers, that's part and parcel of like even this process, right? Like sometimes we may not be able to give like the highest level word that will make them into counterparts of love, but like the things that you can easily share to newcomers and that they may even be able to like sign up for. Like you can be like, hey, like there's this great newsletter that I follow, and it like it has like all of these amazing kind of points and questions and things that I wouldn't think about. Yeah, and like I don't know if that's something that even you guys subscribe to, right? Like are you signed to any newsletters, right? Like this isn't a newsletter, but like one of the things that comes to mind is like even with the Holy Spirit letters, right? Like I actually shared a part of that with a newcomer, and I like told them that, oh yeah, this is from like a newsletter that I'm signed up for, right? They're like, in a part, in a way, it is, right? Like, and I love the Holy Spirit letters. I think when they first started coming out, because like whenever something's new, you don't really know like I didn't know that it was this gonna be. I think this is like the second year that we've like received them, and I think like 2023. At first, I didn't like really read all of them very carefully, but in 2024, like I make sure to read them. I like try to preserve them if I can. Yeah, and so I really really like them, and so like I'm kind of curious to see how many people are interested in something like that, like whether you would want something like that, whether you would even want to be involved, or like whether you know someone else, right? Like I was talking to Pastor Sky about this too, right? Because I know that as much as we have people who like speaking and like stuff like this, right? Like videos on YouTube and different kind of social media platforms too. um there must be people who like writing, and writing is so critical and so important, right? And so I do know of some people already who are like writers, and I have no idea. Like, I'm like 100% sure that each of them had had various thoughts about how they can write for Providence, and they may have their own ideas too. And so I would love to see how we can gather writers together, editors together, or people just who are just interested in reading too, right? To like come up with different things and how we can support one another, and we how that even the writers in Providence can have this process of conversing and like even for themselves too, right? Like and I know that that might be challenging, right? Because every time like you know sometimes it's like hard to put yourself out there, and like let's say you're a writer and you have this idea and you've had this for an idea for a long time, and then you don't know how people are going to take it, right? So I would say that's probably like a big reason why a lot of people who have thoughts, it is for me, right? Like even though I have this idea, right? Like why I haven't done something about it. But through the process of conversing, right? We go through the process of like building things up, like the ambition masterpiece. So it might actually be okay if it comes crumbling down once, or twice or three three times, four times, five times, right? In order to get to the perfect like idea of what it is that God wants us to write in that sense too. And so yeah, I just wanted to see if anyone is interested. Feel free to either privately message me or like leave it in the comments below. Or if there are members who are interested in writing, like feel free to connect me to them too. Right? And maybe I'm sure there's a lot of members who are already doing these things, and I would love to see what's going on, like what they're up to, and like what it is that not that we like if they want to do it by themselves, that's fine, right? Like I don't want to like get in their way or anything like that. But I want to see in terms of the writing element, like what's happening in Providence and what we can do together, and maybe like what we can do to improve on those things, and like what may have been challenges that people are facing and stuff too. So all of that comes to mind, yeah. And so that was the final thing, and so we'll go into our second break for today, and then I will hand it off to Rachel with 2G Talks.
When I look at you, it's like I got the whole room on the tip of my finger, and I'm pointing it right back to you. When I look at you, it's like I got the whole universe, the whole universe. Never thought that living could be easy, so you taught me right from wrong. Now I'm free to be full of love, full of hope. I'm empty of all things. Now I'm living to make everyone come follow me. This is a life worth living that I know. If I love someone else, what would he give me though? It's like I'm floating on clouds, my feet don't touch the ground. Life with you is like heaven, look at what I found. You said believe in me, don't change, and then you'll see a life that lasts for all eternity. And I will never live to have any regrets. I know you're the best, I'll step to the west, I'll follow behind you step by step. Just like the stars above, we shine shining. Look at the world, in my hands the universe is mine. It's yours, can't escape from the love, it's yours. It's yours, can't escape from the love, it's yours. Just like the stars above, we shine shining. Look at the world, in my hands the universe is mine. It's yours, can't escape from the love, it's yours. It's yours, can't escape from the love, it's yours. When I look at you, it's like I got the whole room on the tip of my finger, and I'm pointing it right back to you. When I look at you, it's like I got the whole universe, the whole universe. You said believe in me, don't change, and then you'll see a life that lasts for all eternity. And I will never live to have any regrets. I know you're the best, I'll step to the west, I'll follow behind you step by step. Just like the stars above, we shine shining. Look at the world, in my hands the universe is mine. It's yours, can't escape from the love, it's yours. It's yours, can't escape from the love, it's yours. Just like the stars above, we shine shining. Look at the world, in my hands the universe is mine. It's yours, can't escape from the love, it's yours. It's yours, can't escape from the love, it's yours. When I look at you, it's like I got the whole room on the tip of my finger, and I'm pointing it right back to you. When I look at you, it's like I got the whole universe, 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 the whole universe.
Welcome back, everyone, to 2G Talks. Rachel here. 2G Talks is the segment I hope to create a narrative and conversation around Second Gen's experience in Providence, while also discussing other topics related to Second Gen, all centered only on the Lord. For today's 2G Talks, I have an exciting segment, specifically discussing Second Gen's thoughts on evangelism and how Second Gen view their faith. Hey y'all, welcome back. How was your weekend? I hope you had a great one. For me, last week, I had a super, super busy week. I know Eddie says that every single week, but for myself, pretty much every day after working at my job at school, I always had something. Either we had a meeting to prepare for the second gen retreat, which is so crazy. It's in almost 2.5 weeks, if you think about it. Grading papers from work, or even meeting with different members and meeting with the newcomer, which I'll touch up more on later. Essentially, my week last week was working from 7 to 10 p.m. usually every day. And although that sounds like a lot, it was kind of fun. It definitely did make my week go by a lot faster. And like I said, the thing that I want to talk about the most is referring to the meeting that I had with the newcomer, which happened this past Thursday. So I'll just get right into it because I have a lot to share. One of our members has scheduled a time to meet with this newcomer. This was a newcomer we had slightly connected to in October. And so recently they were able to reconnect with them and asked to meet in a group setting at 6 p.m. in a city that's kind of close by, Houston, maybe 30 minutes away. Realistically, in Texas, you kind of just accept that everything is roughly 30 minutes away from each other. So anyways, the day finally came last Thursday. I got off work around 4. I did my whole thing, walked my dogs, some chores, and started getting ready. At around, 5:10 p.m., I felt inspired. Okay, let me just check to make sure that it's only 30 minutes away and I'll be able to get ready and figure out when I need to start going. I looked at my GPS. When I put in the address, instead of what I was expecting, only 30 minutes, it being away, this restaurant ended up being over an hour away. Evidently, there had been some car accident and the traffic just happened to also be higher than usual. Of course, this sent me into a panic. I was so flustered. I just grabbed all of my stuff and I booked it running out of my house. I didn't even have my shoes on. I was carrying everything in my arms, running down the street to my parked car. I'm sure I looked like a crazy person to everyone. I'm sure the angels had a good laugh too. So because of this, I knew I was already going to be arriving late, probably around 6:10 p.m. So because of this, I called our point of contact person and all the other members who were going to be meeting this newcomer as well, asking when they would get there. Out of the 4 members who were coming, pretty much all of them were going to be from 30 minutes to over an hour late. The traffic was really that bad. So I was really the only one who was going to get there close enough to the set time at 6 p.m. So here I am, rushing through traffic. I'm swerving in between cars. I'm praying for the meeting to go well. I'm praying I don't get hit. I'm praying that there's no cops around me to pull me over. And I don't think I mentioned this prior, but the newcomer that I was going to meet is actually a newcomer I had never met before. I didn't know who she was. I didn't even know what she looked like. Like I said, this newcomer was connected in October. So all the other members who were coming and stuck in traffic had actually met her before and talked with her. So I happened to be the odd one out. I was the new person going to meet the newcomer. Honestly, though, even though this was the case, even though no one was going to show up on time, everyone was going to be late, I didn't know who this person was or even what they looked like, I wasn't really that nervous. Looking back, I think in the past, when I was still in college, and trying to raise my level as I begun my official life of faith after choosing Providence, meeting new people, especially prospective newcomers, was really scary. And honestly, I didn't like doing it. I'm definitely not as extroverted as I am now. Evangelizing was not something that I did at that time because I thought it was genuinely fun or because it was something I wanted to do, but it was more because I felt like I had to, or I should say that I was encouraged to do so, of course, right? I felt I was encouraged to do so by the messages and other leaders and members. And I do think that a lot of second gen or even members can feel this hesitation, and I don't want to say the word dislike, but kind of dislike towards evangelism. I think Pastor Sky has talked a lot about this topic, or even some degree on how evangelism runs, what to do. He has his, scripts that he did on Wednesdays in the past. And Pastor Sky is also really well versed in this topic of evangelism as well, considering how much he has evangelized and is continuously doing so through internet ministry. But for me, somebody who wasn't as passionate as evangelism for like Pastor Sky, growing up as a second gen, I wasn't interested in evangelizing. Heck, I didn't even want people to know that I believed in God. This is how self-conscious I was of what people thought about me. And specifically thought about Christians. Because, when you're in Providence, you can't say that you're in Providence. You have to say that you're Christian. Or usually that's what we say instead. It just makes it easier. But because I knew Christians were crazy, I didn't want to be perceived in that way. I suppose I hated to be perceived in a way that I knew was incorrect. And since I was already struggling with my faith at the time, right, why would I want to bring that kind of stress and anxiety upon myself of people looking at me in a different way that I wanted? And why would I want to tell anyone about that? And why would I want to bring people anyways? Right? Why would I want to evangelize someone if I wasn't even sure if I wanted to be there? Of course, now I have a different perspective, which I want to share with you guys. I learned eventually how to get over being perceived by others. Like I said, I didn't want to be perceived incorrectly. But over time, as I started living in the world, experiencing more people, different types of people, I realized that everyone, people in the world especially, are super self-conscious about so many different types of things. Many of them very irrelevant, to be completely honest. Things that are ultimately going to end. Think about it. No matter how much money you make, when you die, it's all going to go away. No matter how much fame, fortune, friends, no matter, especially, even if you're pretty, all of that is going to end anyway. It's all going to go away. So it came to me, shockingly, if everything in the world is going to end, even the people that are going to judge me, what does it matter what they think of me? Because one day, I'm going to end too. And since I'm going to end, and since I only have one life, I want to live that life to the fullest. I want to be unconstrained, and I want to be free. I want to be free to be just my truest self. And as a second gen, that meant my truest self was a bride of God. And of course, looking back on it, I do think one of the many reasons why I was so self-conscious in myself and about my faith was because I did lack that conviction and trust in God. But once I learned the word fully and came to realize on my own, I realized that I could only trust in God. Because God is eternal. God is not going to end. And because He does exist, and because He is here working on the earth, and most importantly, He's here with me right now, with us. Through this faith that I have in God, I slowly started to gain my confidence. I slowly started to not feel so self-conscious. I slowly started to not care about what other people thought of me. So anyways, going back to my newcomer story, it was because of this newfound faith in God that when I was going to meet this newcomer and rushing to the restaurant, I wasn't afraid. So, now I'm in the restaurant. I arrive. It's around 6:10. I look around, and I'm so grateful I don't see any girl sitting by herself. Because I don't think that would have been a great impression if this newcomer had showed up and no one was there, right? And so, I realize she isn't there. I get us a table, I set my stuff down, and I get up to go to the restroom real quick before she comes. And as I'm walking to the restroom, I'm about to open the door to enter, and I, for some reason, turn around. And as I turn around to look at the front of the restaurant, I see a girl starting to walk towards the entrance or the front of the restaurant and about to open the door. So immediately, I run to the front door I whip the door open and I ask, "Are you so-and-so?" And she says, "Oh, hi, yes, I'm meeting some people here." And I just introduce myself. I say, "Hi, I'm Rachel. I'm one of the people that you're going to be meeting today. I already got us a table," yada, 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 right? And so I go to the restroom, I come back, and we just start talking together. It's just us together for about an hour. As we're waiting for everyone else, this newcomer and I are going back and forth, surprisingly, in a super comfortable manner. And the thing is, the whole time, which was so amazing and something I've never really done before, the whole time we were talking about God and Jesus and how much we loved them. She asked me many different questions. I told her that I was a teacher working at a high school, and she asked, how is it I'm able to incorporate my faith into teaching? She also asked, when I had graduated, I told her I graduated about 1.5 years or 2 years ago, and that my major was biology. And she asked, how were you able to handle topics and theories of evolution and the creation of the world? Simple things like that. But overall, I could see, just talking with this newcomer, how much she was looking for God, which is truly amazing. And through our conversation, even though we had never met each other, we didn't know who each other was or were, we really were able to have that connection because of God and the Holy Trinity. Eventually, the other members were able to arrive, thankfully, getting out of that traffic, and we all settled down together and started eating and having dinner. The main purpose of us meeting this newcomer, of course, was to ask her to do Bible study. When they first met her in October, they weren't really comfortable or able to do so with this newcomer, and so now in December, we were determined to get this newcomer to say yes to Bible studies. Now, I have asked people to do Bible studies before in the past, but this was usually with a focus on street evangelism, or if we were doing booths on campus. So I didn't really have that much interaction with the people. It was more just quick and then go on to the next person. But this time, I knew that I had to do it differently. I couldn't just ask this girl right out because she was such a strong Christian, and I knew that I needed to testify more clearly for our Bible studies. Thankfully, the conversation began to change, and we started talking about how we all wanted to start reading the Bible more. Many of the members there wanted to read the Bible more consistently. The newcomer herself even stated that she tries to read a chapter a day, but that she wasn't really able to fully and consistently do so. For myself, I had actually just finished reading 2 Corinthians, and there was a chapter that came to mind, and I looked for it. It's chapter 11, and this is when Apostle Paul is actually boasting about himself. But really, if you look in depth about it, what he's doing is that he's boasting about how through him, God works and takes action absolutely. So when Paul, quote unquote, boasting about himself, his actions, and his life, he was actually really testifying for Jesus and the Lord. And so because I had just read that section, I decided, okay, let me boast about myself. So I started talking about how I am doing my Impossible Bible Challenge, which I don't know if I've mentioned to you guys, but I created this kind of mini challenge for myself, I guess along with my Perfect Me plan, which is to pick a number that you think would be impossible for you to read every single day. For me, that number is 10 chapters. I think it would be impossible for me to read 10 chapters a day. So every day I'm trying to get to that number. And in doing so, on average, I've actually been able to read about 6 chapters a day. Many days I do get to that 10 chapter goal that I'm aiming for. And of course, this piqued the newcomer's interest because she was amazed at how much I was reading. And she asked me, how is it possible that I was able to read so much? Because for her, she says, as she's reading the Bible, she mentioned that she was in Leviticus, she has a really hard time understanding the discussions and instructions about how to build the tabernacle, what the temple looks like, the inner and outer court, the veil. All of it is so confusing for her. And she really wants to understand, and so she ends up researching half of the time. So she'll only be able to get through maybe a paragraph, and thus, barely even get through a single chapter in Leviticus. And so through her heart of interest, it encouraged me and pushed me to not only boast about myself, right, because that's not the goal, but I used that boasting to steer the conversation and segue into testifying for our Bible study. And so I told her, because Jesus is coming back for his second coming, this is what pushes me to read the Bible even more, so I can be prepared and come to know him. And I told her too that our church's Bible studies focused only on the word in the Bible, and all the questions I had, the confusion, and even questions I didn't know that I had, everything about the Bible became clear through these Bible studies, because they actually taught me how to read the Bible and helped me to realize the Bible and thus prepare for Jesus to come back. And so because I said that, the newcomer was super, super interested and agreed to do the Bible studies with us. So by the time that y'all listen to this segment, we're actually going to be having her first Bible study. Yeah, because it's on Tuesday. So please pray for us. Honestly, I'm really proud of myself. This is the first time the second gen of yours has ever testified for the Bible studies in this way. And honestly, I wasn't even nervous. I was determined. And I am all the more determined to continue to run and help to manage this life. Yeah, especially after gaining full confidence in God and in this history and in the man of mission, I now have confidence in myself. So it's only through them, through their love, that I am able to love myself and not be so self-conscious. Through the Sunday message too, I realized something interesting or kind of new. I've never thought of it this way, and I wanted to share it with you guys. It had to do in relation to the scripture of the talents. Matthew chapter 25, verse 14 through 30. I realized that when the scripture was talking about the master giving his servants 5 talents, 2 talents, 1 talent, it's just like how God has given us each our own talents and skills that we've been born with. Of course, it's not only God giving us these things, but through genetics too, we're born with certain qualities. And this reminds me of 2 Timothy 2, verse 20, which states, "In a large house, there are articles not only for gold and silver, but also of wood and clay. Some are for special purposes, and some for common use." In the same way, I realize that we are born either as wood and clay, or silver and gold. But looking back to the scripture of the talents, even if we happen to be people who are of wood and clay, or silver and gold, or, if we have 5 talents, 2 talents, or even 1 talent, whether we have more or less, our success is solely based according to what we do, how we take action. We have to take action and not be that lazy and wicked servant that buried and didn't do anything with our talents and individualities that God has given to us. Otherwise, everything will go well within the Holy Trinity when we take action and do it together with them. So with that, I'll wrap up today's segment for 2G Talks. Please, if you could, pray for our newcomer who again is learning today. Hopefully it goes well. I hope that for the rest of the week we can all really work together and focus on living to achieve that reality of our ideal world, practicing our faith, and doing our responsibilities. Anyways, please make sure to comment and leave a like or shoot Eddie and I an email at 2gtalks@gmail.com. I hope you'll have a great rest of your Tuesday together with the Lord. I'll see y'all next week.